I have a somewhat nitpicky critique of Inside Out and Inside Out 2. The physics of both movies make little sense to me. I suppose what I mean is that the physics of Inside Out and its sequel make too much sense to me. The physics that govern the landscapes and personified emotions of Riley's brain are not only similar but nearly identical to the physics that govern our real world. If you drop a pencil in our actual world, gravity brings it down with constant acceleration except for air resistance. If Joy drops a core memory, not just any memory, but a core memory, in Riley's mindscape, gravity also brings it down with constant acceleration. But in the mindscape of Riley's brain, it's not just Riley's core memories that remain subject to the laws of physics. Memory orbs, islands of personality, and personified emotions all remain utterly and bafflingly beholden to those same laws of gravity, motion, and mass that control our actual lives. This should not be the case. It does not make sense. The creators of Inside Out clearly put a lot of thought and care into the details of Riley's mindscape. My enjoyment of these details aside, it strikes me as somewhat mismatched that the semi-fantastical realm of Riley's mind remains entirely dictated by the same rules of physical space and matter that dictate our external reality. For example, if some form of an Inside Out themed headquarters existed in my mind, I would like to think that certain safeguards would be in place to prevent freak accidents from taking place there. If two of my most central emotions, along with my core memories, were whisked away from their proper station, I would like to think that they could simply be transported, or even teleported, back without having to manually travel across my mind and its contents. If my crystallized sense of self, my fundamental notion of my identity, were similarly slingshot across my mindscape and then lost, I would like to think that my sense of self could similarly return to my mind's headquarters without requiring another unexpected journey to go and collect it. It makes sense that one's emotions can be lost, such as when one loses their childhood sense of joy. Riley loses her sense of joy for hockey, but she reclaims it by the end of Inside Out 2. It also makes sense that one's sense of self can be lost, like when one pretends to be someone else in order to fit in. Riley loses her sense of self when she pretends not to like her favorite band and when she rejects her old friends in favor of the Firehawks. In other words, the loss of emotions and the loss of a sense of self in the first place makes sense within the context of the Inside Out films. It does not make sense that Riley's emotions or sense of self are physically lost, buried, or separated rather than merely absent or evaporated. In theory, the disappearance of Riley's emotions or sense of self should be somewhat fantastic or surreal, rather than literal and, in every sense of the word, physical. To be fair, I normally would not criticize a film for its physics. I am not the guy who explains why a certain explosion could or could not have taken place, but it's worth acknowledging that the same way many action films are quite unrealistic in their stunts and explosions, the reverse is true for the Inside Out movies. Inside Out and Inside Out 2 are quite over-realistic in their portrayal of moving objects and physical space. But whereas many action movies contain their absurd physics to a few crowd-pleasing scenes or spectacles, the absurd physics of Inside Out directly instigate and contrive the film's plot. Most of the problems that propel the plot of Inside Out forward do not seem to have any clear parallel to Riley's psychological state. For example, it is difficult to imagine a psychological scenario in which a person's core emotions of joy and sadness are arbitrarily forgotten in a chasm surrounded by fading memory orbs, while disgust, anger, and fear become the same person's dominant emotions. Joy and sadness do not find themselves stranded outside of headquarters because Riley has effectively repressed joy and sadness as emotions. Joy and sadness find themselves far away from headquarters due to a freak accident. It all begins with Joy attempting to prevent Riley crying at school from becoming a new core memory. Joy does not want sadness or her influence to take hold in Riley's mind. On principle, emotions should not be able to tamper with core memories in the first place. I mean, they're core memories. And yet, the main plot of Inside Out is kickstarted when Riley's core memories fall out of their rightful places, an act of physics complete with gravity, mass, and acceleration. This accident worsens once joy and sadness are sucked up into a vacuum. Physics concept after physics concept initiates and then spurs the plot of Inside Out. The rest of Inside Out follows a similar chain of events. Some object is unreachable, some ledge is too far away, or some structure is collapsing, and joy and sadness are limited by the laws of physics and circumventing such obstacles. The train of thought that joy and sadness ride is derailed not because Riley has lost a clear train of thought in the real world. The train of thought is interrupted because Honesty Island collapses, and gravity brings the fragmented pieces of this island crashing into the scaffolding for the train tracks. even when joy and sadness are separated. It is less so an emotional than a physical obstacle which joy must overcome as she attempts, over and over again, to escape from the deep gorge of Riley's memory dump. Joy manages to escape from the memory dump on a conveniently located wagon, which belongs to Bing Bong and is powered by song. If the wagon is powered by the magic of song, and thus defies the laws of physics in terms of inertia and initial motion, why is the wagon subject to the laws of physics as a projectile seconds later? Why must Joy launch herself from a perfect angle with the proper speed and without Bing Bong weighing the vehicle down in order to successfully escape Riley's memory dump? Why do the laws of physics apply to one aspect of the wagon but not others? Bing Bong's wagon is magic. If Riley had imagined as a child that the wagon could fly, would the wagon then have the actual power of flight? None of it makes sense. The laws of physics do not bend to mirror Riley's emotional state. Instead, they seem to serve as plot devices. These events in Riley's mind don't appear to reflect any specific mental or emotional phenomena from her actual life. Rather, they present physical obstacles for joy and sadness to overcome seemingly independent of Riley's emotional state. Joy and sadness's failure to return quickly and safely to headquarters is not a consequence of Riley consciously or subconsciously blocking out joy and sadness as emotions. Joy and sadness failed to return quickly and safely to headquarters because headquarters is too far and high away for joy and sadness to reach. This is perhaps the most baffling aspect of Inside Out and its physics. The events of the film would not have happened if Riley's emotions were not bound to the laws of physics. If joy and sadness could just have returned to headquarters without needing to traverse a lengthy route back, the entirety of Inside Out's plot could have been avoided. The same would be true if Riley's personality islands were not arbitrarily connected to headquarters by the thinnest of threads, but were connected by wide walkways. Joy and sadness attempt to cross one of these walkways, but turn around when it cracks and breaks. Even when joy and sadness have reached headquarters, they almost fall into oblivion yet again due to the glass windows at headquarters. Joy and sadness cannot catch a break. The laws of physics never let up. At every turn and at nearly every moment, Inside Out emphasizes Riley's emotional experiences in the real world, but highlight the confusingly physical rather than emotional experiences of joy, sadness, anger, disgust, and fear at the same time. To be fair, one could argue that joy and sadness's exile out of and journey back to headquarters parallels Riley repressing these emotions. However, Inside Out 2 undoes any semblance of purpose to the exile of these emotions when all of Riley's original emotions are sealed in a glass container and carried away. This image serves as a literal reflection of Riley bottling up her emotions. It makes absolute sense that Riley would shove down certain emotions with the onset of puberty and the hormonal changes that define it. It does not make much sense, however, for Riley to bottle sadness, disgust, anger, and fear alongside joy. Perhaps Riley, as many teenagers do, separates herself from the sort of effervescent and unflagging happiness that joy embodies. But the other original emotions are actually quite exaggerated during one's teenage years. Not to mention that anxiety seems to be closely related to fear and embarrassment closely related to sadness. Joy, sadness, disgust, anger, and fear were not kicked out of headquarters as an accurate reflection of Riley's emotional state. So why were they kicked out of headquarters? The short answer? They were kicked out for the sake of the movie's plot. A plot based on their physical distance. The first emotion to successfully return to headquarters is sadness. Sadness manages to return not because Riley is in desperate need of a good cry and magically summons sadness, but because the outcast emotions arbitrarily decide on sending sadness back to headquarters alone. Once sadness returns, it is physical obstacle after physical obstacle that the remaining core emotions must surpass. There are flashes of greater emotional subtlety among the emotions, such as when joy has an uncharacteristic outburst and anger extends uncharacteristic words of comfort. But these moments are few and far between. Joy, anger, disgust, and fear are thwarted in their journey by physical rather than emotional limitations. The physical obstacles the emotions encounter become even more ridiculous as the film progresses, like when they are about to cross over toward Riley's missing sense of self, but a few of her sarcastic comments split her mindscape down the middle. Or when joy, anger, disgust, and fear are hitching an airborne ride toward Riley's sense of self, but become caught in a brainstorm that veers them off course. Again and again, Riley's emotions are thwarted less so by Riley's actual feelings than by the laws of physics which control her mindscape. Anxiety might have banished joy, anger, disgust, fear, and sadness from headquarters in the first place, but the laws of physics ensured that the core emotions stayed far away. Moreover, the laws of physics prevented these emotions from quickly and safely returning throughout the movie. Physics is the real antagonist in the Inside Out franchise, not joy as in Inside Out, nor anxiety as in Inside Out 2. physics. Inside Out and Inside Out 2 are imperfect. Any attempt to translate psychological theories and concepts into visual form will be inherently limited. The Pixar team does an excellent job personifying key emotions in the Inside Out movies, but they falter in their attempt to parallel inner psychological experiences with Riley's outward expressions, reactions, and behaviors. Our internal worlds are not the same as our external ones, though they do often reflect each other. If someone feels joy inside, they are likely to smile. If they feel embarrassed, they are likely to blush. However, our internal emotions and our outward expressions operate more so on a basis of cause and effect rather than direct parallel. Feeling happy causes us to smile. Similarly, if we smile, we can train ourselves to feel happy. But the rules of the real world and the rules of our mind are not the same. They should not be the same. Anything can happen in our minds. Anything. The laws of gravity do not need to stop our emotions, our memories, our trains of thought, or any other inner workings. So it does not make sense that the laws of gravity prevent and inhibit the emotions of Inside Out, contriving obstacles where none should be. I could go on, but at the end of the day, Inside Out and Inside Out 2 are movies. It's not that deep, but neither should be the recesses of Riley's mind. Thanks for watching.